All right, so in this first section of our chapter on culture, we will look at what is culture. We will understand what culture is and how it's different from society, and also how both of them are interconnected. And we'll also differentiate between material and non-material culture. This is one system of classification that sociologists to categorize different cultures. Then we'll also understand how the concept cultural universalism is related to society. And last but not least, we'll also understand different social reactions toward culture, such as ethnocentrism, xenocentrism, culture shock, and cultural relativism. So let's jump into it. So first of all, what is culture? Culture is shared beliefs, values, and practices that can be learned. As we alluded to earlier, we become cultured because we learn how to wear certain clothes, certain color. We learn what is good, what is bad, such as table manners, such as the language that we use, and so on. These are all elements of culture, which we'll look at very soon in this chapter. Society is defined as a group of people who share a community and a culture. So as you can see, society, an expression of society is culture, and culture needs society in order to express itself. So I guess one way to think of definition to keep in mind is that concept of culture is sometimes easier to grasp by description rather than by the definition. So all human groups possess culture, which consists of such as language, beliefs, values, norms, and material objects that are passed down from one generation to the next. So although the particulars of culture may differ from one group to another, culture itself is universal. All societies develop shared, learned ways of perceiving, participating, and work around them. So culture, right, provides a taken for granted orientation in life. So that's definitely a very, very important characteristic of culture. Right? We assume that our own culture is normal or natural. In fact, it is not natural, but as we already talked about, it is learned. Culture penetrates our lives so deeply that it is taken for granted, and it provides the lens through which we perceive and evaluate things. And so one way to think of it is like a fish in a water tank, right? It's in the water tank, but it may not be aware of that until it's outside the water tank. So it's like us, right? We are so, everything around us seems so normal, right? And because of the culture that's around us, it's something that we've taken for granted as what it is, right? And it's not until we get outside of our, local setting, for example, we travel abroad, that we realize that, wow, the way that we've been seeing the world through our cultural lens is something that we often have taken for granted as normal. Okay, the other characteristics of culture is that it is passed down from one generation to the next. Okay, so let's jump. Okay, so look at this flag, right? This American flag. I want you to tell me, right, or think about this. What does this flag mean to you, and how does it reflect American society? So just a few minutes just to ponder on these two questions. So, usually, first thing that comes up for most students is that, well, they see brands that are very iconic of America, right? Apple, Nike, IBM, ABC, right? McDonald's, and so on, right? And so for some students, they say, well, this flag represents capitalism, right? As well as consumerism in America. And for some students, they say that, well, along with that, it also represents innovation, right? That all these brands, reflect how innovative America has been in producing certain goods and services. And so that's linked to American, work ethics. They work hard to innovate, to to come up with new products and services in order to sell to other people. So here's this video. It's a Cadillac commercial. It's only about a minute. I encourage you to stop the video you're watching, me lecturing, to watch this YouTube video in order to, which touch upon several core elements of American culture and the way we live as American. So by now, you should have watched that video, and I hope it's pretty clear from the video that there are certain values that Americans share, and that's distinctly very American. So, culture and society, as we've already alluded to, they exist, they depend on each other in order to exist, and all human groups possess culture, and they may be expressed in different forms, such as festivals, holidays, food, and so on, right? Or icons like Mickey Mouse, for the United States. And culture is also dynamic and continually changing. So it is not static, which each generation has its own cultural expression, or each society has its own cultural expression. So it's constantly changing as well. So keep that in mind. Do not think that culture, American culture, is as is. But that, who knows, in 5-10 years, what is American society will be very, very different. So sociologists classify culture into material culture and non-material culture. Material cultures include things such as jewelry, art, buildings, weapons, machines, clothing, hairstyle. Basically, objects or belongings that you can touch and see. They express a particular group of people. Okay? They represent a particular group of people. Non-material culture, on the other hand, is non-touchable. It is a group's ways of thinking, like beliefs, values, and assumptions. Non-material culture is also common patterns of behavior, such as language, gestures, and other forms of interaction. The other thing to think about when we talk about culture is this idea of cultural universals, which are patterns or traits that are globally common to all societies. So this, this may include, for example, customs of cultural about courtship, cooking, marriage, funerals, laws, music, myths, and incest taboos, toilet training, for example, or smiling, right? In many cultures, smiles express joy. Eating is considered as a social activity, and so on. So these would be cultural universals. However, keep in mind that, despite these universal human activities, there is no universally accepted ways of doing them as well. So, for example, there's no universal form of the family, no universal way of disposing the dead, and no universal method of toilet training as well. So again, keep that in mind. While we have these cultural universals, the ways in which we express them and do them may be very different from each other. Yeah. Not all cultures are received or experienced similarly by the subject, by a person who come into contact with a particular culture. Some might experience ethnocentrism or cultural relativism. So ethnocentrism is when we evaluate and judge another culture according to our own cultural norms. And ethnocentrism is really a consequences when we internalize culture. We use our own culture, and assuming that it's good, right, and superior, we use that to judge other culture. In a way, ethnocentrism is functional or is useful because it creates a sense of in-group solidarity, right? But it's also dysfunctional, or it could be socially damaging, detrimental to us, if it leads to discrimination against those who are simply just different from us. So here I have two pictures that might challenge the ways in which you interact with these particular cultures. So one is cremation at the Ganges River in India. So there, local Hindus believe that the Ganges River is sacred. It's very holy, and if they pass away, they want ideally for their body to be either fully cremated or just partially cremated and then thrown into the river. For those who are living, many of them really desire to go and visit the Ganges River. Many of them take a bath in it, as the same river in which their dead bodies thrown in there. Some of them even drink the water, again the same river in which many dead bodies are thrown into. So I definitely admitted I was quite ethnocentric when I observed this scene, and I was like, ew, yuck, this is dirty. We American would never do this. So that's very ethnocentric of me to say that, because for them, the Ganges River is so sacred, right? And for generations, many of them drank water from the river, and they seem to be, okay. Again, right? Like I was being ethnocentric, thinking my ways of living, that we would never do this to dead bodies, right? Okay. When I was living in Cambodia, I also witnessed how local people eat crickets, and the crickets are usually sold in its full form, full body form. And as you can see in this picture of this woman eating a cricket, you can see the legs of the crickets, right? Yeah, you eat the whole thing. So of course, I must admit I was a little bit ethnocentric at first, being American. I was like, yuck, this is really dirty food. Why would you do that? But guess what? Now we have cricket crackers in the U.S. and Europe, right? So crickets are actually a very good source of protein, and apparently it's healthy. But I was being ethnocentric, saying that I would never do this, right? But see, I was proved wrong, because now there are cricket crackers in the States and elsewhere. Okay. Cultural imperialism is when we deliberately impose our own cultural values onto another culture. So for some people, they might think many of the, what we embrace as a very American ideals and icons is a form of cultural imperialism, when these cultural icons, penetrate another society and try to influence them to become American as well. So for example, I've traveled quite a bit, and oh my goodness, nearly every country I've been to, there's a McDonald's, at least a McDonald's, right? And also in nearly all countries I've been to, there's, Starbucks is, almost everywhere, right? Disney as well, right? It's a very well-known company brand, especially its characters, right? Saying this to tell you that, like, even when I was in Russia, right, I saw McDonald's there in Russia, and Russian, as you may know, the history of Russia and U.S. Relations, not always very, very friendly, and yet here I was in the Red Square in Moscow, and Red Square is where a lot of Soviet Union leaders, prominent leaders are buried there, and yet there's a McDonald's, which represents American capitalism, right? So again, cultural imperialism again is when people sense that, like, another culture, right, is imposing its own values, its own present, into another society. Culture shock is what we experience when we come into contact with a radically different culture, and this interaction challenges us to question some of our basic assumptions. So, for example, in Dubai, you often see, women, women at beaches in which some might be fully clothed from head to ankle, and the other is almost nearly naked, right, wearing bikinis. So this might be a shock to some women, or even men, right, who observe how the women are dressed so differently from each other at the beach. Okay, the image I have here is of, I believe it's a Hindu god, right, or deity Hindu temple, and as you can see, looks very, very different from what many of you may have been encounter as representation of a religious or divine figure. Right, many heads, many hands, and so on. Right, so some of you might be a little bit shocked by this. So here I've also included a video, which I must give a warning that includes some graphic images, so you don't have to watch it if you don't want to. But it's about Tibetan sky burial, which is a tradition in Tibet. And so by watching this, I think some of you might, most likely experience a little bit of culture shock. So go ahead and pause my video to watch this Tibetan sky burial video. Okay, so I hope you, watching the sky burial, open up your eyes to the, what culture shock, what is like, by watching this burial, which is so different from what we do in the U.S. Okay, another concept that we need to wrap our head around with when we're talking about culture is cultural relativism. Which is when we assess a culture by its own standards and not compare it to another culture. So, for example, here I have pictures of standards of beauty across different cultures. So, in the U.S., we might emphasize a certain body of a person, right? Certain parts of the body, right, as beautiful or sexy. So, in Japan. And you can do this on your own with Google Images. You'll see that historically, at least, the geisha's neck is the most central parts. In Thailand, with the Kayan community, having long neck, right, is seen as beautiful, and this is why young girls, start wearing, neck rings, and then every other year or so. Another neck ring gets inserted, so that way she will have a very, very tall neck. And then in Ethiopia, with the Mercy community, beauty is when, is the plate, the lip plate, right? The bigger the plate is, the more beautiful it is. So this is a standard of beauty in Ethiopia. So, of course, they're very different from American standards of beauty, especially when we're talking about a woman's body. But, I'm going to, in order to practice cultural relativism, I'm going to try to respect it, these standards for what they are, and not judge them as, weird, strange, but just, okay, this is how it is in other countries, and I will go and try to understand why they see, like a lip plate as beautiful, for example. That would be cultural relativism. Last but not least is this idea of xenocentrism, which is the opposite of ethnocentrism in the sense that in xenocentrism we have the belief that another culture is superior to our own. So, for example, in many Asian culture, women want to have lighter skin, right? So they will, they invest a lot of time and money into lightening their face, for example. Another form of xenocentrism is, for example, we might see that, city life or New York City as kind of like representing, representing cosmopolitanism, right? That we're open-minded and so on. So that's, and then many of us might aspire to go there to live in New York City or big city rather than in rural areas, for example. So that could potentially be a form of xenocentrism, is that when we think that another culture is superior to our own. Or another possible xenocentrism is thinking that Bay Area or Silicon Valley is, the best place to live, to work, and so on, right? And that anything that comes out of there that's produced there is the best or better than us, and we should always try to aspire to, replicating the life in Silicon Valley. So, again, xenocentrism is when we think that another culture is superior to our own. All right, so this concludes our first part of culture.